It's the top 5 equipment for Commander in
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to our pilot episode for Commander Countdown. In this series, we're going to be going over your top 5s for various themes in Magic. We'll also be doing an on-theme deck tech at the end of the video.
Today, it is the top 5 best equipment for Commander overall. Equipment, very important for your gameplay, whether you're adding just 1 or 2 here and there because they can fit in pretty much any deck, or you're committing to a full equipment theme.
Let's get into it.
To start off, we have each picked an honorable mention that we think should have made the list, but didn't. So, what is the Nerd Girl top 5 equipment that didn't make the list?
Well, I have no idea why this didn't get more votes, but I've got to say, Helm of the Host does everything I want to do in Commander. It triggers all of my ETBs, it makes a ton of creatures, lets me turn things sideways, and really puts on the pressure. I have no idea why this card wasn't at the top of the list.
Because it's basic.
I'm basic, Veggie.
Helm of the Host, more like basic of the basic. It's
That's so mean.
It's strong, it's powerful, but it makes you an instant target, and the only way you're really getting value out of it is if you can play it and equip it in the same turn, which costs 9 mana.
Don't you play with mana in your deck?
Yeah, I do, but I don't want to wait until I have 9 out to do a sorcery speed ability.
Well, you can play it in 2 different turns. You can play some mana dorks. I don't know. Fine. What is your premium Veggie pick?
Nobody voted for this. My honorable mention is Pact Weapon.
What even is that? I don't know if I know this card.
I know you don't know this card because that's the mark of a good Veggie pick. Pact Weapon, if it's attached to a creature, you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. And whenever that creature attacks, you draw a card. It gets +X/+X, where that's the cost of the card, and you lose that much life. But that doesn't even matter.
So you're going to put your life to 0 or below, and then I'm going to blow this creature up, and then you die?
Yes.
And why is that? Or deserving of the best 5 equipment slot?
Because that's exactly what I want to do in Commander. I want to first cheat and then lose in hilarious fashion.
I have no idea why all of the comments are always being so mad at me for killing you when all you want is death.
Very seriously though, this is an incredibly powerful effect to be stable to an equipment. And as long as you can protect that creature, you're drawing extra cards and hitting your opponents really, really hard. Plus, there's a lot of ways to exploit that ability of going less than 0 life.
Yeah, all that creature protection in black.
Exactly.
Easy. All right, now that we've gone over our honorable mentions, let's go ahead and go into your guys' top 5. Coming in at number 5, we have Shadowspear. This is an absolute staple in all Commander games because it gives +1/+1 trample and lifelink. That's a lot of keywords. It also allows you to pay 1 and remove indestructible and hexproof.
I'm actually very on board with this. Every deck can use a little lifelink and a little trample. Plus, you get it on the board for next to no mana. But the thing that pushes this over the edge to definitely be top 5 is the fact that it can remove hexproof and indestructible from all of your opponent's stuff. That's blah, blah, blah. Look, I can't even process how good that is because there are so few ways to remove those things from your opponent's stuff, and doing so can be the matter of winning or losing a game.
Yeah, so this gets around to like boggle effects, and sometimes those decks are the most annoying things ever. So having a built-in way to deal with some of those, which is not needing to fill your deck full of board clears, is a major win.
This means that your games won't go forever because you have a way to punch through and to get rid of the problematic things that are on your opponent's board.
Yeah, because you're not resetting the board, you're just helping yourself. So endless board clears are annoying.
And not needed now.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and move on to number 4.
Coming in at number 4 is Sword of Feast and Famine. Cost 3, equip for 2. Equip creature, of course, gets +2/+2 and pro black and green. And whenever it hits somebody, you untap all lands you control and they discard a card.
Yeah, this card is an absolute powerhouse. It's got to be one of the best swords. Definitely, I think, my favorite. And it's actually in our last episode of Decked Out, was in one of my decks. So if you guys want to check it out, you can see it in action there as well. But I will say protection from black and green are two very important colors to be protected from in Commander. So I think that is, for me, the biggest part of this card. Yeah,
that means you're preventing your opponent from killing your creature, and it's getting around the big green blockers that would be stopping you from hitting that player. Also, untapping all of your lands, so you're effectively doubling your mana with for just 5 while making a threat that is hard to kill.
Yeah, and if you're doing something cool like double striking, casting instant speeds, this card does a ton of stuff if you build the deck right. All right, moving on to number 3. You guys voted for Skullclamp.
Oh.
Skullclamp costs 1 and only costs 1 to equip, and target creature gets +1/-1. And when equipped creature dies, you're going to draw 2 cards.
I love this card so much.
I hate this card so much.
I love this card so much. Do you know how many formats this card is banned in? The only places that you can play this legally are Commander and Vintage.
And I'm so sick of you playing it in every stinking deck and drawing a million cards. You're never the threat until you just run away with the game. This was in your insect deck that we played a few months ago, and holy smokes, the value on this.
Yeah. Are you playing a deck that has any sort of 1/1s in it? Great. Slap a Skullclamp in there, because being able to pay 1 mana to draw 2 cards over and over and over again at the cost of 1 of your tokens probably is absolutely huge. And it doesn't even feel good for an opponent to be like, all right, I'll spend my removal to kill your 1 mana artifact.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that there are some synergies where when a creature dies, it helps you make more things anyway. So it's just kind of fueling itself and doing its thing. And this card amounts to a ton of value. And honestly, I can see why it's banned in every other format.
Unban it. Unban it.
Format.
All 4 nats.
All right. Next up.
Coming in at number 2 is Swiftfoot Boots. And at number 1, Lightning Greaves.
I can definitely see why both of those have made it to the top 2 slots. They're basically auto-includes in most decks.
Yeah. But all you voters out there, lame. These cards are very good at protecting your creatures, but nobody's running interaction in Commander anyway, so you're protecting them from spells that don't exist.
Veggie, we asked for a very specific topic. We asked for the best equipments in Commander, not the least lame or the most veggie choices. And these are the best equipments. You put them in all of your decks.
Yes, it's true. Actually, being able to give haste to all of your creatures for 0 or 1 is pretty good. And then you'll get some free attacks until everybody realizes that they need to destroy your Greaves or your Boots. But that's still taking out a good piece of removal and getting in some attacks that people are not going to expect.
These equipments that give you hexproof are also super important for any deck that has the Commander as the centerpiece of the deck. For example, my Yannette just simply will not function if Yannette's not on the board. So being able to give her hexproof means that I can actually make the deck function. Without them, if she's removed in any way, I'm just sort of dead in the water. So these are really important.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting. The Lightning Greaves did beat out Swiftfoot Boots in your voting. It's very, very close, but Lightning Greaves took the top spot. And there are marginal differences, but I do think it's significant because Lightning Greaves equips for 0, which is infinitely less than the 1 that it costs for Swiftfoot Boots. But the trade-off is that Greaves gives Shroud to the creature as opposed to hexproof. So you yourself cannot target it once it's equipped.
Now, in a lot of decks, that's not super important, but it can be, especially if you're trying to run some sort of green, combat tricks or hexproof cards yourself that, well, I guess you don't need hexproof in this, but anytime, if you wanted to like Snakeskin Veil to get the +1/+1 counter on top of to play it as a combat trick, it's not going to work.
Yeah. So if you have the mana to spend, Swiftfoot Boots is, I think, a better choice. But Lightning Greaves means that you don't need that extra mana to be able to activate the ability. And it also, yeah, I know that I have many times had Lightning Greaves on the board with one creature out and then not been able to do the thing that I want to do without taking it off and then having somebody kill the creature in response.
Yeah, I will say I think in most decks, the differences are, not relevant because you're not going to be targeting your own creatures very often. It takes a very particular type of deck. So I would say in most of my decks, I'm running probably both of these anytime my commander is relevant.
Yeah. And I think it is right. Lightning Greaves taking that number 1 spot because 0 is a very powerful number in Magic the Gathering.
As it turns out, it breaks some things. Also, my Lightning Greaves have a corgi on them. They're so cute.
And for that, Lightning Greaves gets the number 1 spot, best equipment overall in Commander.
Next up, we are going to be going over a deck submitted by one of our patrons. This deck actually matches the theme of today's episode.
The commander is Ayesha Tanaka Armorer. This creature, whenever it attacks, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, you put any number of artifacts from them with mana value less than its power onto the battlefield tapped, and it can't be blocked as long as the defending player has 3 or more artifacts.
This is an interesting commander for an equipment deck, and I actually was fortunate enough to get to play this on one of our episodes this past month, I believe.
It did some work.
It did. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the deck itself, and then we're going to go ahead and look at EDHRec and possibly look at some upgrades and things that we might be able to change up just to maybe spice the deck up. Blade of Selves, that's a good one. Yeah,
that's I think a card that is incredibly powerful that gets overlooked a lot. Getting multiple copies of a big old Ayesha could be pretty strong, but I think it's going to really shine if you can get it on any other creatures, especially with ETBs.
We also have Lightning Greaves, notably our number 1 card for the community chosen top equipment. So very important.
Mm-hmm. And they're also the Swiftfoot Boots. Now, this is one of those instances where I think Swiftfoot Boots is much better because you can continue to equip your stuff without moving the Greaves around because of the Shroud.
Yeah, these are also really important in this particular type of deck because you're building up creatures very tall, so you want to protect them. You end up having a lot of equipment, and sometimes you run a little light on creatures.
Mm-hmm. The Mystic Forge here is a little spicy. Being able to cast any of your artifacts off the top of your library means that if you are seeing stuff that's a little more expensive than what Ayesha can get you for free, you can just cast it off the top and be able to hit some of your lower cost artifacts. Also checking out the Hammer of Nizan, a classic auto include for any equipment deck because it equips your stuff automatically and makes the creature indestructible.
Now that is a lot of swords. How do you feel about so many swords being in one deck? Even though this is an equipment deck, I still don't think I usually see quite this many swords.
I mean, they're cool. Swords are cool. They're like some pretty iconic cards in Magic. The only thing that is a little tricky is that some of these swords will give you protection from your own colors, which may cause you to run into some issues later if you're trying to target the creature with your own spells. But I mean, overall, if they're also protecting you from your opponent's stuff, I say toss them all in there.
I will say, Helm of the Host not in here. Unfortunate. I didn't see it. Did you?
Good choice. It's a good choice.
Boo. The last card I want to mention here is the Sword of the Animist. Love that card.
Yeah. This in blue especially, and somewhat in white, although it's getting it a little bit more. It's hard to ramp, it's hard to ramp and like continue on with your own theme. You have to like add at your own expense, spend mana to get those like rocks on the board, or to use the white mana ramp. But this is just doing it all at the same time.
And getting that extra mana really helps with the equip cost because you have this permanent mana sink built into your deck that sometimes decks just, if you don't find your Soul Ring, they just can't handle, especially if you don't have a lot of card draw to go with it.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the creatures. Let's take a look at here. I like that. Brass Squire. It is a very simple card that helps the base of the deck, helps it run smoothly without needing a lot of mana.
Yeah. And the advantage that this has over some of the other effects that allow you to attach your equipment for free is this is instant speed. So you can move an equipment to like save one of your creatures using the protection from a swords, or you can get in sneaky damage here.
Swiftfoot boots.
Or Swiftfoot boots.
So you have instant Swiftfoot boots that can protect your entire board, which is super important.
Mm-hmm.
Scrolling down, I see Novice Knight, another one of those sort of early synergy cards that, you know, they don't look like a lot, but when you have all of these little 1 and 2 drops that synergize with the rest of what your deck is trying to do, adds up to be quite important.
Yes. And like 1 and 2 drop cards in Commander that have some sort of impact on the board are very underrated, because most people at that point are just playing tap lands or ramping, and that's a creature that is going to become a problem very quickly that people have to figure out how to handle at the very beginning of the game.
So those are the bread and butter, you know, lower impact cards, but I'm seeing a Saram on the board here. That is an auto include in anything dealing with equipments. How powerful do you think Saram is in this deck?
This is actually very interesting because it's conflicted. You immediately you're like, okay, equipment, great, drawing cards, need it. And it's going to help you get some cards early. But actually, once you get Ayesha onto the board, it's going to get you those equipment for free, thus dodging Saram's trigger. Now, probably by that point, you've got your whole engine humming and you don't need the extra card draw. So I really want to see Saram early if I'm playing this deck, but it's not as impactful later in the game.
So here's a question for you. Do you keep Saram in your opening hand with no equipment?
Yes.
Yes, I made the right choice.
I think that you do, because we saw how many equipment cards there were that were packed into this deck. Plus, if I see that on the opposite side of the table, I'm going to have to use some of my early removal to take it out of the game. But yeah.
Okay, just double checking. I wanted to make sure I made the right choice. Spoiler alert, I was a little light on equipment in the beginning of that game.
As we saw in the game, Sun Titan, very, very impactful here.
Sun Titan's great. It's a big beastie that hits real hard, but also brings back all of your equipment. So even if your opponents manage to deal with them, you just get to bring them back. Mm-hmm. And it's free and it's amazing. And it's an ETB trigger. So like you're going to get the value out of this no matter what. Right.
Like all of the equipment that we saw earlier, conveniently, all of those swords, mana value 3, they all come back from Sun Titan. Blade of Selves on a Sun Titan means 4 Sun Titans. So you're going to get those enter the battlefield triggers when it swings, and suddenly you've got a massive board.
And he's not even a legendary. Beautiful.
I really like the reality chip here. It's a good card to begin with. It's already really good. But it's also an equipment. So you get all of the extra bonuses from that, whether it's just dodging the equip cost or being able to put it onto the board for free with Ayesha.
It's nice too, because a lot of times I see a lot of equip decks that are Boros. So you don't have access to things like reality chip that give you that card advantage. So I like that this is Azorius colors, gives you a ton more card draw and access to some really cool equipment that you don't usually see.
Yeah. Even on top of that, the reality chip is top deck manipulation. So if you can guarantee at least one hit off of Ayesha's attack trigger because you know what the top card of your library is.
Yeah. Not a lot in the way of enchantments here.
Yeah, Sigarda's Aid, classic, auto include. Endless Horizon is one that I don't see quite as often, but it's doing the job of feeding you lands, which we mentioned before is not the easiest thing to do in these colors.
Moving down to the instance, Hindering Light. That's a unique card.
Yeah, this is a personal favorite that I definitely don't see very often, which you should be playing more. It's pretty situational. You have to target an opponent's spell that is targeting you or something that you control. But for just 2 mana, counter it straight up and draw that card back. So you're not losing any ground, and you're doing a pretty big effect for very little mana.
Yeah. And we also have all of the staples here. We've got, some counter magic, very, very reasonable for blue. We also have Path to Exile, some removal, some flicker. And now we've got a land base. We got a couple of non-basics here. Anything stick out? Inventor's Fair.
Yeah, that's for sure an auto include in your artifact decks, and it's nice to be able to tutor for whatever equipment that you need specifically in that moment. Again, with the full suite of swords in here, you can just be like, all right, what colors are you playing? Great, that's the one I'm gonna have protection from now.
All right, so that's the deck, right? The next thing we want to do is maybe sort of go over this theme a little bit more and see what sort of maybe spicy new includes we can find, or things that maybe they might have missed.
Yeah, let's see what EDHRec has to say. Okay, so on EDHRec, you can just enter your commander's name, search it up, and you'll get a list of a bunch of cards that are synergistic, stuff that have just come out, and what most people are using for your commander. But also, if you go up to the top here and click Recs, it'll give you the option to put in your deck list, and it'll give you a personalized recommendation for what to add. So we're going to take a look at what it said for this Ayesha list.
Yeah, I like the front page because it helps you with all of the synergies that you're looking for if you need help building. But this is going to allow you to take decks you've already built and find the things you missed. They're hard to find sometimes. Oh, yeah, look, there's even a little rating at the bottom based on how many decks this card is in. That's super relevant.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Forge Anew. That's one of the new Lord of the Rings cards. In fact, it was my preview card. So very excited to see that here. And I definitely think that is a solid include.
Yeah, the more ways that you can have to equip for free, I think is a big win.
We have some basic stuff like, lands and mana rocks, but you only need so many of those. So I think that the builder of the deck, D. Schultz, had plenty.
Yeah, you have a lot of options. There's a sword that is not in the deck list, sort of once in future, one of the newer ones. Now, it does give you protection from half of your colors, blue, but we didn't see a lot of blue spells that are targeting your own stuff. And this one, the Surveil 2, somewhat helpful because it's filtering the top of your library, but you're not casting a bunch of instants and sorceries. So that one, I'd say up in the air.
Colossal Hammer, a card you see in a lot of these decks, but I don't know if the deck had too many free equips, which makes Colossal Hammer a little tough. But with Forge Anew, maybe we have enough.
Mm-hmm. Like for me, that's an 100% add. Even if you struggle to put it on one of your creatures, like it's just, you put it in for the memes.
I agree. I think I want to hit people with that giant hammer. It looks absurd.
All right. Oh, yeah. So I would say if I were running this, I would definitely want a little bit more removal. And Dispatch is, in this case, just a better Swords to Plowshares, because you're almost always going to have 3 or more artifacts, and you just straight up exile a creature, no downside.
Yeah, I like that. It's a really great artifact card.
Mm-hmm.
Lion Sash, that's an interesting one. Helps with a lot of graveyard stuff from your opponent as well. So sort of twofold, does the equipment thing that you're looking to do, but also gives you this sort of backup plan to mitigate what your opponents are trying to do.
Mm-hmm. It's even a body if you need it. You could equip stuff to the Lion Sash and hit your opponent with it.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. This is definitely a personal favorite. Strionic Resonator. You can double your Ayesha Tanaka triggers and get even more equipment onto the battlefield just for 2 mana to activate.
Or you can copy triggers from things like the swords, right?
Or from the swords. Or from Sun Titan.
That's a nice one. Loxodon Warhammer. I think that's one of my personal favorites. I love Lifelink and Trample, and especially when you're making it huge. And there's so many things that give first strike. This card is an absolute monster.
Yeah, it's a classic. All right. Almost scrolled past. We have Masterwork of Ingenuity here. You have a bunch of very strong swords, but you can only have a single copy of them in your deck. What if you were to put like 2 Sword of Feast and Famines on your creature? This enters as a copy of any artifact or of any equipment, and it only costs 1. So you're almost always going to be able to play that off of your Ayesha trigger.
It's nice that you have the flexibility. If you have multiple equipments in different circumstances, one might be better than the other. So, for example, none of your opponents are playing green. Maybe the Feast and Famine is not the best target. So I like that flexibility in the mid game. I think that's very good. We also scrolled past like Teferi's protection. There's definitely, a lot of flexibility in building these decks, in deciding where you want to be. But so far, I think our deck submission is pretty spot on.
Yeah, it's got all the pieces that you need. It's got a solid core. It's got some interaction, and it's got a way to finish the game out. Let's see, and there's some solid like tutors and card draw in that I think are pretty much covered. This is just giving you some other options.
I like that All the Glitters is actually not in this, even though it synergizes well with the artifacts and the enchantments. I like that more in a Boggles themed deck if you're going to have a lot of hexproof stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. And like you're going to have a good number of artifacts on the board, but you're not going super wide with your artifacts. You're not making tokens and stuff. Culture Complete. I mean, I'm a Culture Complete supporter. It's just a very cool equipment. Does so much for your creature. +5, first strike, trample, indestructible, haste, and when it hits a creature, you exile it. Again, you probably want to be running that. You probably want to be running that Forge Anew for another way to equip for free, since a 7 equip cost is a little hefty.
Wait a minute. You are anti-Helm of the Host, but you want 7 equip? What is this?
Yeah, because this comes in with a creature. It's a living weapon. So the equip for 7 is just an extra bonus later on. Really, you're just playing this big old creature for its original cost.
I disapprove.
Right? And it's haste. So you get this right away and you're swinging with it.
All right. We'll agree to disagree.
Okay, I think we have to point out Urza's Saga here as an include. I'm surprised it sounded this low.
Yeah, actually, only 18 of the decks is that's what that number is, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a pricier card. It did get a reprint, so it's a little bit more accessible, but definitely a nice include if you can afford it.
Yeah, that's your money upgrade there. Being able to tutor out so many different enablers in this, or just, Soul Ring. This seems to go pretty solidly, even making a body that is relevant here. The construct that it makes on Chapter 2 gets +1 for your artifacts, which you are going to be stacking up.
So the last card I say we close this out on is a card I like that I see on this list, which wouldn't make most decks. And I would say Cephalopod Sentry is really cool because it synergizes really well. And I love building high synergistic decks with Draft Chaff because I don't want super high power level. And I think these cards are really cool that they work very well with what the deck is trying to do. Sorry, it was cute.
Sorry, you're apologizing to me for wanting to put garbage in your deck?
Yeah.
I am very much in support of that. And it's got a pretty big butt. That could be super relevant.
We do like big butts.
Mm-hmm. I can only tell the truth.
Where's Hammy's butt? Hammy, show me your butt. I think that wraps up our deck tech for our very first patron submitted list.
Yeah. It's a good time with Azorius equipment, and we know what we might adjust if we wanted to up the power level or the price tag. That's Brain.
To wrap up our deck tech, we'd like to give a special thank you to the patron who submitted this for our deck submission, and that is D. Schultz. If you guys would like to see this deck in action, we put it in an episode called All Dressed Up, I believe, and you guys can see what this deck does. I actually got to pilot it, and it was a ton of fun, so make sure you guys check that out. Thank you so much for watching our pilot episode of Commander Countdown.
Thank you to our sponsor, EDHRec, for making this series possible and for helping us to build our decks.
If you would like to submit a deck list for us to go over during the deck tech portion of this series, make sure you head over to our Patreon. You can also vote in the description down below for the top 5 list for each episode. And leave us a comment with any equipment you think should have been mentioned in the top 5, or any equipment deck that you have that fits the theme so everybody else can find some new decks.
We'll see you next time on
Commander Countdown.